We'll continue on from last lesson for REST API. So welcome to lesson 8. We'll deal with post, put, delete. Okay. So with post, in this table, we would have the URL path for the slash location, but that is only going to create a location for one, right? And we want this to have this full URL path. And for the reviews, to create a new reviews, we just need the slash reviews. But we have to specify the parent, right? Which is which location does it belong to? Okay, post methods work by taking form data. Remember back in our pug templates, we have the form, right? Form data posted to them and adding it to the database in the same way that URL parameters are accessed via request.params, right? Query streams are accessed via request.query. Express controllers access posted form data via the request.body. Okay. We'll have more example of these. Right. So going back to the MongoDB, right? When you specify the model name, you now have access to Mongoose methods, right? You can do a create to map it with the post request. So when we create, we now have to have two parameters. One is a JavaScript object containing data that matches the schema, right? And the callback function. So the first parameter is error, and the second is the document as saved in the database. So we would use the posted form, excuse me, to create a JavaScript object that matches the schema and send an appropriate response. In this code, we'll show you that in the locationsCreate controller, right, you would now have a excuse me again, sorry, location.create, and we specify the name, address, facilities, coordinates as the property, and the value we would get that from the request body. Remember, if someone sends a form data, it should have that form data is the body. each field that, or each input that we got has a corresponding like a value, or like a value, right? And we specify them as name, address, and also facilities. And then also the coordinates, right? We can extract that from the requests from the other application. And we would just have the parse float as well to parse the float data. And after this first one, right, this is the first parameter for the create, right, method. The second parameter would be callback function, the error indication, right? If we encounter any error, let's throw back a 400 and also whatever that error was. Else, if it's good, let's create that. No, what I mean by if it was created, right? If the location was created successfully, let's return a 201 means that it was created, and also return that JSON location object, right? Whatever you have saved, return that back for the application that requested it as a confirmation. Validating the data using Mongoose, right? So the validation code stops user from entering empty or partial documents, right? So it's the same thing as when you add validation rules in your form input data. You can also add validation in your model. Okay, for example, required true. This is visiting back the MongoDB or Mongoose section. The min and max range for your rating, right? And the default being a 0. And so on and so forth. So if field is missing, for example, the name field is missing a value, it automatically would raise an error, right? And it won't save the document to the database. Okay, going back to the Postman, you can test your post request again. Make sure you supply the key value pairings like this. And if it's successful, you should get a 201 created and the uh, updated location object, right? Creating new subdocuments in MongoDB, save to the parent document, right? Putting another way, to create and save a new subdocument, you have to find the correct parent document, in this case, the correct location, add a new subdocument, and you save that subdocument, not that specific subdocument, but you save the parent document. Okay? So, controller for creating a review, now you would have the reviews create, where you would have the request and response parameter. And as usual, because this is only taking a request, so it should send back a response, right? But because we are taking in a request, we can access the request body or params as well. In this case, let's access the request params location ID, right? So if location ID, right? If location ID is exists or was included in the params, right? Then we can proceed with this code, wherein the location model, let's find by ID this location, right? If we find the location and then select the reviews, which is the subdocument, then let's execute the query. If we encounter any errors, let's throw back a response, status code 400, and the JSON object with the error. If we didn't encounter an error, let's execute this do add review. So this is another function. So it will be calling a do add review function, right? That would take in the request, response, and the location, right? So this one goes to here. Whatever's here goes to here too. Okay? And then if the location ID is not found, then we can respond with a 404 location not found, right? Okay. So subdocuments are arrays of objects to add a new object to an array, right? Because the reviews subdocument has the array, right? Data type, so we can use the push method. So we want to push the following: the author, the rating, review, text, and we can grab those data from the requester, right? From the form data, right? So they are an array of objects. So to add a new object to an array, use the JavaScript push method. Okay, let's first do the location.save, right? And then the callback function with the error object and the location object, right? If there's any error, you know the drill. If there's no error, then let's have the location.reviews array and access the last element, right? Access the last element or the last review in the array, right? And response back with the status 201. And then show a this give back the that object, right? Okay, so again, we're saving this to the parent. So before that, we have to do these, right? So beforehand, right? We have already have not done the 201 here, right? That's why you see the 201 here. Okay? And again, entire parent document is returned and not only the subdocument, the new subdocument. Okay? So this is now the do add review that was abstracted with the reviews create function, right? If the location does not exist, you know this. If it exists, then let's now use the request body, right? And this is a shorthand to basically assign a key value pairing, right? get the author and the author that we got here, rating, review text, okay? Then we can now access the location review subdocument and push that because it's an array. We have access to the push method. We can now have the author, rating, review text inserted, right? Then we can do a save. Then with the save, this is now where we throw in an error if we can't. Else, if we save, the other next thing that we want to do is update the average rating, right? Remember that in a location, we have a lot of reviews, right? Each review has a certain rating. We got that now. And in each location, right, which is the parent, the location has the average of all of the reviews, right? So that's why we also have to update the average rating, right? So this is another user-defined function. We supply the location ID, right? And we'll go to this function later. And next is, we know this, where we do the location.reviews slice -1, right? So what this does is it would basically slice the reviews array, right? And it leaves the last element in the array, and then you pop it, right? Once you pop it, you get the last reviews, right? And then responds back that it was created. And the reason we did this is not really to manipulate. Remember, we have already saved, right? We are not manipulating it because we assign it to a variable. We are just saying that here's the object that you have added to your array, right? Okay. So now let's talk about updating the average rating. You want to find the correct document, right? Given the provided ID, you want to add all the ratings. You add first, right? And then calculate the average rating value. Once you have done the calculation, you have now to update the rating value of the parent document, meaning you have to change the value in the parent document and then save that. Okay, so to do that, right, you would have a do set average rating, and in this logic, if location.reviews, it means that if there is at least one or more reviews for that location, and if the reviews.length is greater than 0, it's another check if there is at least one review, right? Then let's do a location.reviews.length. The length meaning the number of reviews, assign that to count, right? And now let's count the total. How? Let's now do a locations.reviews. So all of we access the reviews array, and we now want to do a reduce function or method. So the reduce method takes in an accumulator, right, and the value, right? So what this does, basically, it would go into each element of the reviews array, and then it will keep accumulating this ACC variable, right? And the rating would keep changing and keep accumulating to the ACC. For example, if I have two reviews, review rating 5 and review rating 2, the first time it does this, it will be 0 plus 5, right? And because reduce would go over each element, and then now, the next time it iterates, it will be 5 plus 2. Then you'll have the total of 7, right? Once you have that, you just do this. This is a simple average calculation, right? Where you divide the total with the total number of reviews, right? And that should be it for this logic, right? So that's why when we go back, right, we update the average rating. How do we update the average rating? We need to find the parent document. Okay, how do we find it? We specify a model, we find the by ID using the location ID, we select the reviews subdocument, right? Execute that. If we did not encounter error, let's try to set the average rating for that location. All right. Okay. So put methods similar to post, but you're just updating instead of creating something new, right? So the approach in updating is you find the relevant document, make some changes, send the document, and send a JSON response like the post request. Okay, the steps for updating an existing subdocuments are, you know the drill, find the document, the subdocument, change the subdocument, and save the parent document. Then send the JSON response. Here's an example. If you do want to update one, okay, let's first check if the request params location ID exists and the request params review ID exists, right? And then if any of them doesn't exist with this double pipe, meaning an or operator, let's return a 404 and this message, right? If we have both of them, we can proceed this to this one. The location model, let's do a find by ID. We'll first try to find the location. Once we find the location, find the subdocument reviews. Okay, then we execute the query. Then let's check first if the location does not exist, throw error. Throw this message. If we have any error, throw this error. If we get the location correctly, we can now do an additional check. Is there any reviews and any reviews in our reviews array? If yes, then let's proceed to now grabbing the ID of the subdocument, right? If the ID of the subdocument, which is now this review, does not exist, so review not found. If it exists, then we can start the update. We can now update the values, right? Using what we got from the form data request, the request body, and then get the author, rating, review text, and assign it to our current variable, this review. And then now let's save it to our location collection, right? When now we're trying to save it, any error, throw an error. If we are successful with updating it, don't forget we have to always update the average rating. Okay, and you know the drill with this one, right? Okay, sends a JSON response. Else, no review to update. Delete would be almost the same thing, right? It's still a write to the database. You can do find by ID and remove using the Mongoose method, right? You should first find the location ID. You got that from the request params. And then once you find that, you execute the query. That's it. Any error, return an error, right? And then if there's no error but the location is not correct, then throw this to 04, right? And another error there wherein there's no location. Okay. So you can break it into a two-step process. If you prefer, you can find it and then delete it. Find, execute, then remove. Okay. The steps for deleting: find the parent, find the relevant subdocument, remove the subdocument, save the parent document, confirm success or failure of the operation. Remember, so this is the same with the post put for subdocuments as well. So you want to do the location that reviews that ID, right, and specify the review ID and remove. Okay, so if you want to delete one, we check if both the location ID, we first check the request parameters in the request URL if we have location ID and review ID. If any of them is null, right, then say not found, right? And if location find ID, first find the location, select the reviews, location not found, throw an error. any other errors, throw an error, right? If we have any reviews, then we can do an additional check. If the reviews ID is null, does not exist, review not found. Else, we found it, now we can remove it with this dot remove method, right? Now we have removed it, we want to save it, right? So we now execute the save, then if any error, return the error, and because we remove a review, we have to update the average rating again. So now you're seeing the beauty of reusable code. So in our post, put, and delete functions, we use the update average rating function, right? Instead of writing it 3 times, I mean the whole code base. Okay, so we update the average rating, and then 204 is a successful deletion, and then just return a null to say that it's no longer there. And if all else fails, they can say no review to delete. So by now we have completed writing APIs to our and then interacting with our API server and to the database with the get, post, put, and delete methods. Okay. Let's see you guys next lesson.